The court has always decided controversial cases. The decisions have always been subject to intense criticism, and that is entirely appropriate. Obviously, people can say what they want, and they're certainly free to criticize the Supreme Court, and if they want to say that its legitimacy is in question, they're free to do so, but I don't understand the connection between opinions that people disagree with and the legitimacy of the court.
Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. We so rarely hear from him. That was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts, making today's rebuke by him of Donald Trump's rhetoric pretty darn remarkable. Chief Justice John Roberts scolding Donald Trump's call to impeach a federal judge. The Chief Justice saying this, quote, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for a purpose." About that, the New York Times writes this, quote, "Just weeks ago, Chief Justice Roberts' point would have been uncontroversial. There is no modern tradition of impeaching judges for their rulings. Just 8 federal judges have been impeached, convicted, and removed in the history of the country, most for egregious criminal and personal behavior." As noteworthy as Roberts' statement is, we are finally seeing him draw a red line when it comes to Donald Trump's attacks on the judiciary. It is worth pointing out, though, that this is not the first time Donald Trump has attacked a judge. We can go all the way back to before Trump took office, the first time, when he attacked Judge Curiel, who was presiding over the Trump University lawsuit. Trump attacked him simply because of his background.
He is giving us very unfair rulings, rulings that people can't even believe. This case should have ended years ago on summary judgment. The best lawyers, I have spoken to so many lawyers, they said, this is not a case. This is a case that should have ended. This judge is giving us unfair rulings. Now I say why. Well, I'm building a wall, okay? And it's a wall between Mexico, not another country.
But he's not from Mexico.
In my opinion,
he's from Indiana.
He is his Mexican heritage, and he's very proud of it.
And there have been, of course, numerous attacks by Donald Trump against other judges who have ruled against him since then, bringing us to his latest target, Judge James Boasberg. Trump calling for Judge Boasberg's impeachment following that judge's ruling that stops Trump's efforts to deport Venezuelan migrants by using the very rarely invoked Alien Enemies Act. The judge asked for DOJ to answer questions based on the timing of the flights over the weekend that saw over 200 alleged gang members deported to El Salvador, to which they replied to some. Judge Boasberg then followed that up this afternoon by asking for answers to more specific questions, giving them a deadline of noon tomorrow. It's where we start the hour. Some of our favorite experts and friends. Deputy Director of the Immigrants' Rights Project at the ACLU. Lee Gelernt is so busy, but he made time to join us, and we thank you. Lee's been facing off against the Trump administration in court over the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act. Also joining us, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's back, and MSNBC political analyst, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller's here. Lee, let me start with you and the case. Tell us the latest.
Yeah, so the latest is we're fighting on multiple fronts. As you know, Judge Boasberg issued a short temporary restraining order so he could hear more arguments, pointing out that the Alien Enemies Act is a special wartime authority that's only been used 3 times in our country's history, all during declared wars, the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. And it basically says you can declare an immigrant, an alien enemy when there is a declared war with the United States or another foreign government or nation is invading us. And so given those limitations that Congress put in the law, it's not surprising it's only been used 3 times in our country's history. The president now has said, I'm going to use it against a gang and remove these people, not only remove them, but send them to a Salvadoran prison where, frankly, they're doomed. And not only am I going to use it against a gang, not a foreign government, but I'm not going to give people any chance to dispute whether they're a gang member. So that's all playing out. The judge issued this temporary restraining order. The government immediately appealed it and is in the Court of Appeals now seeking an emergency stay of that ruling. We just filed our brief 1 minute ago. We don't know when the Court of Appeals is going to rule or have oral argument on it. the same time, the district court's going to keep his expedited schedule. While all that's going on, the judge is also, the district court judge, Judge Boasberg, is also considering whether the government violated his order. He was very explicit. I mean, he could not have been more explicit in this Saturday night hearing we had with him, an emergency hearing. We said, I want these planes turned around if they're headed with these people and bring them back to the United States so we can sort this out. The government did not turn the planes around. There seems to be no dispute that the flights were still in the air at the time. The government is saying, well, they were out of U.S. airspace. The judge, is very skeptical of that argument, as are we. But as you pointed out in the introduction, is asking for more factual information. So we'll see how all that plays out and what findings the judge makes about whether his order was violated. But at the same time, we'll be arguing about the legality of the Alien Enemies Act's use here.
Lee, we had so many conversations between the re-election of Donald Trump and the inauguration and the commencement of the immigration policies about this moment. But I want to ask you something pointed about it. I mean, Trump's folks are all over right-wing media talking about a part of this story, right, about the president's right to deport violent criminals. That's something that has 87% public support. But why not? It seems that he has the authority, if these really are all Venezuelan gang members, to go ahead and deport them. Why cut out the part of the process where you simply have to prove that or provide any evidence that that's the case? Exactly,
Nicole. That you're hitting it right on the head. That's the situation. They are playing this out as if the judge has ordered them to release people or precluded the government from arresting people or precluded the government from deporting them. The immigration laws give the government enormous authority if someone genuinely is deportable, is a gang member who has committed crimes. What the immigration laws do, what Congress has said is, though, give them process so they can contest that, right? And so the government's making vague allegations about who's a gang member, who's not, and cutting out all process. The reason they're using the Alien Enemies Act is precisely to cut out any process and to be able to send them to a Salvadoran prison. Under the immigration laws, they couldn't be sent to a Salvadoran prison to be held there indefinitely. So that's exactly why they're using it. But anybody who thinks that the question is, should these people be allowed to roam around the United States, or should they be sent to a Salvadoran prison? That's the wrong framing. They can be removed to Venezuela after they go through the process if they lose.
And Tim Miller, this seems to be the political nexus that the Trump White House hopes no one crosses, right? They would love for everybody in the media to be pressing on the substance of who has been deported. But I think it's the process here that is the bigger story, right? You take a group for whom, if the facts are there, literally 0% of Americans are sympathetic to their legal rights. But they have rights. They're human beings. And if we don't actually know if people as young as 14 are actually members of a gang, it feels like the process is what should focus our mind.
Yeah, and it should scare people, to give the government this kind of power when they've shown that they're going to act so recklessly across so many verticals. Look, I hear you on how the specific cases are, sometimes, get you bogged down into an area that gets onto Trump's turf. But why don't I try you on one of the cases here for one of these, the Venezuelans that allegedly has been sent to El Salvador. According to a lawyer that we interviewed for the Bulwark, that this person is a gay Venezuelan that has tattoos because they're in the arts. They're into arts. They were in America in a detention center, so they're not roaming the streets. This was not a dangerous person. So somebody that was fleeing a communist country. So again, thinking of what Republicans had traditionally been for. This is somebody that fled communism to come find freedom in America. And according to this person's lawyer, I will have to see the details, they have been disappeared by our government, put on a plane, sent to El Salvador to like a dystopic RoboCop penal camp. And like you've seen the images from this is like nothing that we would do in this country. So I don't know, Nicole, maybe that's popular with people. Like maybe the American people are for Donald Trump and Elon Musk willy-nilly choosing to send people who are fleeing communism to disgusting prison camps in other countries with no due process. I'm not for that. I find that absolutely despicable, and I think that it's worthwhile to at least make the case. And we need to know more. We need to know more about some of these cases. And I think that you're right at the biggest picture, talking about the process here, talking about the fact that these people did not get a chance to defend themselves in a court of law. And again, I think it's okay to say that if in some of these cases they're really gang members, they're out in the street doing crimes, then great, like send them out. Everybody's for that. But this process where like Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and Elon and Donald Trump just get to decide that somebody gets sent to El Salvador because they had a tattoo, I mean, that is not America.
Say more, Tim Miller.
Well, it just is. Look, it's fundamentally what the country has been about. I don't know. I remember when I was younger, one of the things that made me a Republican, actually, that kind of radicalized me was the Elian Gonzalez situation, right? When the Clinton folks were in charge. And obviously all these things have complicated specifics. But like America is a country that welcomed people that were fleeing persecution, fleeing religious persecution, fleeing government persecution. That's like why we exist. That is the whole point of America. And particularly in this case, when it comes to people fleeing a communist country to come here to find freedom. And if they came here to do crimes, then send them back. But if they came here to find freedom, and we are going to treat them in the same way that a authoritarian country would. We're going to send them to some other country where they're going to shave off their hair and put them in shackles and put them in chains and not feed them and treat them like they're subhuman with no due process. Like, what is the difference between us and China then, or Russia? Like, honestly, like what is the difference between us and authoritarian countries if this is how we're going to treat people that are coming here looking for a chance to live a life? Like, again, we can argue about the policy. If you want to say, sorry, we can't take any more refugees from Venezuela, we've taken too many, you have to go home. Okay. But we're just going to pick you up off the street because you have a tattoo and send you to an El Salvador RoboCop dystopia? No.